All right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving into something that could literally save your life, especially for those of us in the concrete jungle. We're talking essential first aid skills, but specifically geared towards urban preppers.
Yeah, it's a different beast than wilderness first aid, right? You've got unique challenges to think about in a city, more people, fewer resources, and a whole different kind of chaos when things go south.
Exactly. And luckily, we've got a great guide to help us navigate this. This essential first aid for urban preppers really breaks it down. 9 key skills we need to master.
9 key skills, yeah. And I think we got to start with the one that makes everyone a little squeamish, right? Severe bleeding,
Ugh, yeah, not a fun topic, but definitely essential.
for sure. I mean, the human body, it's pretty resilient, but when you start losing blood rapidly, that's a hard stop. It can lead to shock, organ failure,
Yeah.
the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so let's say the worst happens and someone's bleeding badly. I'm guessing that classic first aid move, direct pressure, that's still the go-to.
Absolutely. Direct pressure, just like you'd hold a clean cloth on a cut. Super simple, but honestly, super effective in a lot of cases.
Simple but effective. Gotta love that.
Right. But if we're talking about a major bleed, especially on the limb, you might need to step it up. That's when a tourniquet comes into play.
Oh yeah, tourniquets. Those are serious business though, right?
No kidding. This isn't some DIY hack. Using a tourniquet wrong can cause more harm than good, so proper training is crucial.
Makes sense. So basically, urban preppers, we need to make sure our first aid kits are stocked and ready to go. Gauze, bandages, a tourniquet. I'm adding this to my list as we speak.
Smart move. Now, let's shift gears a bit. From bleeding to, well, burning.
Burns. Ugh. Another one I hope I never have to deal with.
You and me both. But think about it. You're in your apartment, the power's out, maybe flickering, and you accidentally touch a faulty appliance. Bam, a nasty burn. Or, a simple cooking mishap. These things happen, even in a concrete jungle.
True, true. Those everyday scenarios can sneak up on you. And speaking of burns, I remember reading somewhere that putting ice directly on a burn is a bad idea. Something about damaging the tissue.
You got it. That's a myth we need to bust right now.
Yeah.
Cool running water, at least 10 minutes, that's the gold standard. And here's where it gets interesting. Burns, they're classified by degrees. First degree, that's like a mild sunburn.
Hmm.
Third degree, that's serious stuff. Needs immediate medical attention.
Wow, okay, so understanding the severity is as important as the treatment itself. Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to another potential risk, and I really, really hope I never experience this one, broken bones. Imagine this scenario. Earthquake hits, debris is everywhere, and you fall and, well, snap something.
Not a pretty picture. And in that kind of chaotic situation, the key is immobilization. You absolutely do not want that broken bone moving around, making things worse.
Right, so that's where splinting comes in. I've seen those fancy medical splints, but what about in a pinch, in an urban setting? Could you use, like, a rolled-up magazine or something?
Now you're thinking like a true urban prepper. Resourcefulness is key.
MacGyver style.
Exactly. You can get creative with splints. But here's the catch. Improper splinting, that can actually make things worse. So while I applaud the creative thinking, having at least some basic knowledge of splinting techniques is highly recommended.
Right, so it's not just about doing something, it's about doing it right. Makes sense. Okay, this one always sounds kind of mysterious to me. Shock. What exactly is shock?
Yeah, shock. Well, think of it as your body's extreme response to any major stress, and it doesn't even have to be physical trauma. Severe infections, allergic reactions, even extreme emotional distress can trigger it.
So basically, shock is kind of a catch-all term for the body just freaking out. What are the signs?
Yeah, good question. You're looking for pale, clammy skin, a weak pulse, maybe some confusion or dizziness. Basically, the body's systems are saying, we've got a major problem here.
Okay, so say you're in a chaotic urban situation, right? And you see someone showing those signs of shock. What do you do while you're waiting for the professionals to arrive?
First things first, call for help. Immediately. Then, while you're waiting, try to keep them warm. Elevate their legs a bit, helps blood flow to the vital organs. And don't underestimate the power of reassurance. Remember, in a chaotic urban environment, managing shock can be as much about psychological support as it is about physical first aid.
Makes sense. It's like a whole other level of care, beyond just treating the physical injury.
Absolutely. And speaking of different levels of care, let's talk about another challenge urban preppers face. Temperature extremes.
Oh, yeah, temperature. That's a big one.
Huge. Imagine getting caught in a blizzard with the power out, or a heat wave with no AC. Knowing how to handle both hypothermia and heat exhaustion, that's crucial in those concrete jungles.
Right, we're talking two opposite ends of the spectrum here, but both potentially deadly. I'm guessing they need completely different approaches.
You're right on the money. Hypothermia, that's when your body temperature drops dangerously low. You gotta warm the person up, but gradually. Heat exhaustion, that's when the body overheats. Cooling them down is the priority. Knowing the difference between these two, it can literally save a life.
Okay, so with hyperthermia, no jumping straight into a hot bath, right?
Exactly. Gradual warming is key. Think warm blankets, maybe some warm drinks if they're conscious. No alcohol, though. For heat exhaustion, you want shade, cool air, loosen clothing, and rehydrate. Electrolytes are your friend here.
Which actually brings us to another sneaky danger that we often overlook: dehydration. It's not as dramatic as a gaping wound or broken bone, but man, can it mess with your thinking, especially in a stressful situation.
You're telling me. And the thing is, the signs could be so subtle. Dry mouth, dizziness, even confusion. Easy to miss. But staying hydrated, it's non-negotiable for an urban prepper.
So having a good water supply is a must, and I'm adding electrolyte solutions to my shopping list as we speak.
Good call. Now let's talk about a skill that really embodies that whole life-saving aspect of first aid. CPR and rescue breathing.
Okay, yeah, CPR. It can feel a little intimidating, to be honest, but isn't it all about that rhythm? Like 30 chest compressions, 2 rescue breaths.
That's the basic idea, but the technique, that's what's crucial. The depth of those compressions, the pace, it all matters. That's why taking a proper CPR course is so important. It gives you the confidence and the skills to perform it correctly, even under pressure.
Yeah, because in a real emergency, you don't want to be fumbling around trying to remember, was it 30 compressions or 20? Muscle memory, that's what we need.
Exactly. Muscle memory. All right, now let's switch gears again to a situation that's a bit more, well, graphic. Removing objects from wounds.
Ooh, yeah, that one sounds straight out of a horror movie, but I know, it's real-world stuff.
It is. And here's the thing. Unless it's a tiny splinter, pulling out a large embedded object, that can actually cause more bleeding and damage. It's often best to just leave it in place and control the bleeding around it.
So sometimes, not doing something is the best first aid. Counterintuitive, but I guess it makes sense.
Exactly. Now, lastly, let's talk about poisoning. This one can be tricky because it covers so much ground. Accidental ingestion of chemicals, food poisoning, even misidentified plants. It's a whole category of potential danger.
Right, and I've heard activated charcoal can be helpful in some cases, but there are also warnings about it, right?
Activated charcoal is not a magic bullet. It can help absorb some poisons, but it's not for every situation. Always consult with poison control or a medical professional before using it. And unless they specifically tell you to, never induce vomiting. Could actually make some types of poisoning worse.
Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. From bleeding to burns to broken bones to poisoning. It feels like these 9 skills are like the ultimate urban prepper toolkit, but knowledge is just the first step, right? We need the actual tools too.
You got it. That's where building a personalized first aid kit comes in. And that's what we're going to dive into right now. No breaks this time, folks. You'll need all this fresh in your mind for what's coming next.
All right, so no breaks. We're diving straight into building that personalized first aid kit. And honestly, after everything we just talked about, I'm thinking my own kit could use a serious upgrade.
Yeah, it's not just about having a random assortment of stuff crammed into a box, right?
Yeah.
It's about carefully selecting the tools you'll actually need for urban prepping. It's like, assembling your own superhero utility belt, but for medical emergencies.
Okay, I love that analogy, the urban prepper's medical utility belt. So where do we even begin? What are the absolute must-haves for this arsenal?
Well, let's start with the foundation of any good first aid kit. Wound care. You'll need a variety of sterile bandages, gauze pads, adhesive tape, and antiseptic wipes. And don't skimp on the antibiotic ointment. Infections, those are a real concern, especially in a disaster situation.
Makes sense. And gloves, right. We got to protect ourselves too.
Absolutely. Protecting yourself from potential infection is crucial. You never know what you might be dealing with. Now, let's talk pain relief. Over-the-counter meds like ibuprofen or acetaminophen, those are essential for managing pain and reducing inflammation.
Yeah, pain relief is a must. But what about those of us with, like, chronic conditions? If I need daily medication, should I include that in my first aid kit too?
100%. Having a backup supply of any prescription medications you rely on, That's non-negotiable.
Mm.
And don't forget about allergy meds like antihistamines, especially if you're prone to allergic reactions.
It's like each kit needs to be tailored to our own health needs, like a medical fingerprint almost.
Exactly. Now, remember we talked about those makeshift splints for fractures? Having some triangular bandages and medical tape in your kit, that can really help you turn everyday objects into effective splints.
And what about a tourniquet? Is that something everyone should have, even if, the thought of actually using it is kind of scary?
A commercially produced tourniquet, it's definitely something to consider, especially in a disastrous scenario where severe bleeding is a possibility. They're designed for safe and effective application. And remember, while we hope you never have to use it, knowing how to apply a tourniquet correctly is vital.
Speaking of things we hope to never use but need to know about, activated charcoal. We talked about it for poisoning, but it's not like a cure-all, right?
Right. Activated charcoal, it can be helpful for absorbing some poisons, but it's definitely not a magic solution for every situation. Always consult with poison control or a medical professional before using it. And unless they specifically tell you to, never induce vomiting.
Got it. So many things to remember. It's clear that building this first aid kit is about way more than just grabbing some bandages and antiseptic. It's about anticipating specific needs, potential scenarios, especially in an urban environment.
Exactly. Think about the unique challenges of your city. Are you in an earthquake zone? Hurricane-prone area? Do you live in a high-rise building? All those factors should influence what goes into your kit.
It's like urban prepping meets medical detective work. You're analyzing your surroundings, predicting what you might need. Kind of cool, actually.
Right? It is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And remember, a well-stocked kit, it's just one part of the puzzle. The real game changer is the knowledge and skills to use it effectively.
Right, what good is a fancy tourniquet if you don't know how to apply it properly? We've talked about the 9 key skills, but how can we, as urban preppers, actually hone those skills, make them second nature?
Well, that's where taking action comes in. Knowledge without practice is like having a car but not knowing how to drive it. You got to get behind the wheel.
So are we talking about signing up for, like, one of those official first aid courses?
That's definitely a great step. You'll learn the latest techniques, practice in a safe environment, gain the confidence to act in a real emergency.
I've heard those courses can be pretty intense, like with realistic simulations and all that.
They can be, yeah, but that's kind of the point. It's about building that muscle memory, developing the ability to stay calm under pressure. And don't stop at just one course. Look into more advanced training like wilderness first aid, or even, EMT certification if you're feeling really ambitious.
Wow, EMT certification. That's next level. But for those of us who aren't quite ready for that, what are some ways to, like, practice in everyday life?
Tons of opportunities. Volunteer at community events, assist with first aid at your workplace, or even, just organize practice sessions with friends and family.
Turning family game night into a first aid drill. I like it. Learn while having fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of mental rehearsal. Imagine yourself in various emergency scenarios. Mentally walk through the steps you would take. It's like mental workout for your first aid skills.
Oh, yeah. Like, athletes use visualization techniques all the time. I guess it makes sense for first aid, too. If you can picture yourself doing it, you'll be more prepared when it actually happens.
Precisely. And speaking of being prepared, let's not forget about situational awareness. This is a skill that goes hand in hand with first aid, especially in an urban environment. Being observant of your surroundings, identifying potential hazards, taking proactive steps to mitigate risks that can prevent accidents and emergencies in the first place.
So it's not just about reacting to a crisis, it's about anticipating it.
Huh.
And taking steps to avoid it altogether.
Exactly. Urban prepping, it's as much about prevention as it is about response. And as we wrap up this segment on first aid skills and preparedness, I want to leave you with a final thought.
Okay, a final thought. Hit us with it. We've talked about the knowledge, the skills, the gear, but what's that, like, intangible element that brings it all together?
It really comes down to mindset.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating that resilience,
Right.
resourcefulness, and a commitment to, like, always learning, always growing. Those are the qualities that make a true urban prepper.
So it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving, even in the face of a disaster. That almost sounds like, I don't know, personal growth, even outside of prepping.
It totally is. And the best part is, this whole preparedness journey, it's open to everyone. No matter who you are, what your background is, what your physical abilities are.
Because at its core, preparedness, it's about being adaptable.
Right.
Using what you have. And always being willing to learn new things.
You got it. Now, after this deep dive into essential first aid, we want to leave you with one question to think about. We covered the 9 skills, building your kit, ongoing training, but how are you going to take all that and make it work for your specific urban environment?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's about looking at your city, your neighborhood, your own living space, and figuring out what are the potential hazards? What resources do I have access to? What works for someone in a high rise might be totally different for someone in a suburb.
Exactly. Preparedness, it's not about just checking off boxes. It's about equipping yourself with the knowledge, the skills, and that all-important mindset to face any challenge that comes your way.
So, to all our fellow urban preppers out there, stay curious, stay prepared, and never stop learning. Until next time, stay safe out there.